Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome back to our New York Islanders franchise mode here in NHL 25. So in last episode, if you did not catch it, we had free agency and started up the season simulation. And so far, it's been a little bit of an inconsistent start to the season, because you could see here, where does it show our record? Oh, right down there, 18, 16, and 1. So we are 7-3 in our last 10 games, so we are trending in the right direction, but this team has been kind of inconsistent like they have been in the past, so I'm hoping that we can find that consistency going forward. There's been some pretty good stats and then there's been some pretty bad stats on our team, so hopefully some of those things kind of readjust themselves a little bit. But you can see right now, Brock Nelson, the man on a mission. He was great last year, great in the playoffs, trying to get that Stanley Cup. He's still doing great this season with 22 goals in 35 games to lead the team, 31 points. But everybody on this roster is under point per game, which is a little bit of a concern, I would say. But we are still a pretty damn good defensive team. The only thing that is a bit concerning on the defensive side of things for me is this top six defensive pairing of Johnson and Broberg. They both have been pretty bad defensively. But the one thing that's been even crazier is that Ilya Sorokin has an .896 save percentage. So he's having one of the worst years of his career up to this point. Last year he had a .914, year before a .913, and in the first two seasons a .908 and a .909. So he's been pretty damn good for the most part, but he definitely is regressing a little bit this year, which is kind of a cause for concern. I'm hoping that he's not dropping off in overall and all that stuff, but this might be one of his last years here on this team, because obviously we're going to start to tear it down soon enough. And Nikita Khudobin, the rookie, has played 8 games so far, and he has been a very good goaltender. He's outperformed Sorokin, which is kind of impressive for a minor starting goaltender at the moment. So hopefully Khudobin still has a good rest of this season. Hopefully he doesn't drop off in his stats too much. Like, I think he's definitely going to drop off, because the .950, I feel like, isn't like something he could maintain an entire season. But if he does maintain an entire season, this guy could be up there for like a Calder or something like that as a goalie. But yeah, very impressed with him so far up to this point in time. So there are some good stats, but there is also, like I said, some bad stats. Like after Brock Nelson, in terms of scoring goals, he's literally got 10 more goals than the next closest player on the team. So we need a little bit more depth scoring, I think, in our lineup going forward. And I'm hoping that we could obviously get better defensive results from that top six pairing, which hasn't been good so far up to this point in time. But anyways, before we get into simulating more of the season, maybe looking at some trade options for next episode, let's get in your guys' comments and see what you guys have to say. And then we will potentially make some line adjustments and stuff like that to try and get our team to simulate a little bit better. So the first comment is from Sour Taco. It says, Philip Grubauer going to the Devils as a crackhead. I say good luck with that. Alex Lafreniere to Tampa is cool if he simulates as in-game as well as he's been doing in real life for the Kings. Far as your team should go, put Cizikas as the third-line center, as that's where he was when Gord was injured. Move Gord to fourth-line center and get Parsonen back to the left wing. Minimize the amount of trades, as you don't want to be giving up that capital when you're on the cusp of a rebuild. And yeah, that's true, because like even though we technically want to make this team better, we also are going to be starting off our rebuild relatively soon. So in that sense, we probably don't want to be giving up picks and prospects and that type of thing. So I don't know if we're going to be really making a lot of moves this season, even if this team is kind of not doing the best as they have done in the past. But we will be making obviously some line adjustments. So he was suggesting, let's actually go and do those already, because I don't think anybody else suggested some line adjustments really. So he was saying basically to get Parsonen up on the left wing side of things. Then he was saying basically to put Gord as the fourth line center. I guess he wants to stretch back Beck Malmstein in that sense. So we'll take Beck out. And then we'll put Casey Cizikas as the third line center for now. Obviously that does make us a bit weaker on that bottom six, but I think that is a good idea just because Casey could actually win faceoffs, Gord could win faceoffs. Like that way we don't have somebody like Parsonen who can't really take faceoffs down the middle, because faceoffs are kind of a crucial thing to get possession of the puck. So it would be making more sense to have guys that can win draws all throughout the lineup if possible. So hopefully that makes the bottom six a little bit better. And then maybe it'll help the top six pairing a bit with their defensive play too, because yeah, you can see Ryan Johnson and Broberg have been complete outliers on the plus minus side of things. So hopefully those guys play a little bit better. If they don't, obviously when we get to the trade deadline for next episode, we could look at potentially upgrading his top six. We could always put Mayfield back in, but Mayfield has dropped off a lot, so I don't really think it's worth putting him in. We could just use him as a depth defenseman, but for sure, maybe looking at upgrading his top six would be not a bad idea, because it won't be super cost effective either, I don't think, to upgrade that top six. Like, we might have to give up like a late round pick or something like that, but I don't really know if that's a good idea too, because we are going to be probably tearing it down as early as this upcoming off season. The next comment is from Dylan Burrows, who says, I don't know why I typed Duclair, I meant Frank, lol. I literally commented on that episode, such a brain fart, about to finish the episode now. And no worries about that, Dylan. I've kind of figured out you meant about Frank Vetrano, but wasn't too sure. Because, yeah, Duclair was dealt like a couple episodes ago. I don't remember how many episodes ago at this point, but he was mentioning about actually Frank Vetrano when he was mentioning about trading him away. But I really do like the way Frank's been with this team for the most part. And I really have been happy with how he's been assimilating this year. Like, 27 points is pretty good. Through 35 games last year, he had 73. Like, he's probably one of our more consistent players, I feel like. Like, obviously, his first 2 years here weren't the craziest, like 48 points and all that. But I definitely think he's starting to find himself a little bit. He is 34 years old, though. So he will likely be retiring relatively soon. Like, he's actually got his potentials in exact bottom six, despite listed as a second line forward. So this could be one of his last years already, despite only being 34 years old. So hopefully we don't lose him to retirement, but at the same time, we will be having to make some off-season adjustments and rebuilding all that stuff type of thing. So it's either he walks to free agency pretty much, he gets traded away at this year's deadline if our team's not competitive, or we just basically, maybe he retires or something instead. The next comment is from Michael Dos, who says, I would look for a fourth line center and see if you could include Mayfield in that trade to dump his salary off the books. And then he says, I think Crane at the end of the year will be an 82 of rating. So he says we should upgrade this fourth line center spot and get rid of Mayfield's contract off the books. To be honest, I think Mayfield's going to retire this season, so it's going to come off the books regardless. And even if it doesn't, it's only 1 year left and it's only $3.5 million. It's not really that big of an issue. So I don't think we necessarily need to. It would be nice for Mayfield to retire with the club that drafted him as well. But obviously, yeah, we could technically upgrade our centers a little bit, but I feel like it might be too costly. But if it's a fourth line center, probably not. But obviously, Cizikas is more suited as a depth forward. He has actually been pretty good for us so far this season, but he's got good defensive stats still, so I think he still should be serviceable in that bottom six. Meanwhile, Yanni Gourde as well has been dropping off and not playing as good as he did last season, so he's maybe one of those guys we could upgrade if we want to move him over to a right wing, get a better fourth line center. That could be something we look into at the deadline as well, but I'm not too sure if we're going to really look to make much trades just because, like I said, rebuild is imminent, and we don't really want to be giving up too much and hurting our rebuild that's going to be starting relatively soon. And the last and final comment is from Ryan the Sharky, who says, Ovi. So I think he wants me to trade for Alex Ovechkin, who was on the trading block. I think right now we're going to hold off, but obviously if he's on the block by the trade deadline, maybe we want to look into him a little bit still. I feel like he would be a great addition for like our bottom six and also our power play units in terms of bringing that offense that we kind of lack a little bit. But at the same time, I feel like it would be better suited if he decides to retire with the Washington Capitals rather than with a team that he shouldn't probably ever play for. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I don't know if he will actually be brought in just because of the rebuild territory and stuff that we're going to be going into relatively soon. But there is that. And I think we're ready to get into simulating a little bit more and seeing if those line adjustments that Siren Otaku was mentioning about help our team a little bit. Like I said, we'll keep a close eye on this top six defensive pair and see if that plus minus improves. If it doesn't too much, that likely is something we'll look at in terms of the trade deadline, in terms of improving maybe. But obviously, the rest of the team, I'd say, in terms of defense, hasn't been that bad. So that's the one issue really I have, other than Sorokin not simulating that well. So hopefully Sorokin starts to find himself a little bit as well. Also, sorry if my voice sounds a little bit sore. It's because yesterday I was obviously playing floor hockey as of this recording, and I was also at a season ticket holder event. I'm not a season ticket holder myself, my buddy Kevin is, but I actually got to meet some awesome players. I wasn't able to get much photo opportunities, but I did get a photo with Chris Neal for the second time in a year and a half, which is pretty awesome. And then I also got to meet Nick Jensen, what was it? Jake Sanderson, Jacob Bernard Docker, and also Shane Pinto. So I got to meet all 4 of those guys, got some autograph cards from them. So pretty damn cool time. And yeah, I might have a little bit of a sore voice just because I was actually socializing, which doesn't really happen that often, I guess. So yeah, that's basically that. Anyways, I think I will start simulating and see how this team does. We'll take it a little bit slow just because obviously we're not going to simulate a ton in this episode. And we do want to make sure our team is getting the best out of our players as much as possible. So let's go 36 games to start January and see how we do over that stretch with the new adjustments in our lines. Start off with a 3-0 loss. Then we win 5-1. Then we lose 3-2. Then we are going to lose 2-1. Then we win 4-3 in a shootout. I'm not going to do that trade, but that's actually not that bad of an offer, to be honest. We basically get rid of a 4th and a 5th, and we get rid of one of our prospects that's not going to make it probably for basically to move up into the 4th round, but I'm not going to do that. Game against Montreal coming up is another win. So you can still see there's that inconsistency, and that's the one thing I'm a little bit worried about with this team because we got shut out technically now in back-to-back games there. We didn't win 5-1, so great game. We didn't lose by 1. We lose by 1. We win by 1 in a shootout, and then we win 5-1. So definitely some inconsistency, but we are still in a wild card spot, so that's good. But we got to be very wary that there's a chance that we could just barely make it into the playoffs or barely miss if we continue on this trajectory. So games against Eastern Conference opponents are probably more important than Western Conference ones, but in general, every single game is important as we simulate the rest of the season. So let's go 36 games, and then we'll go through the last 2 games of the month. But let's see if we can string together a nice little winning streak or something like that, because we've won 2 in a row at this point. And Ryan Johnson has been injured with an upper body injury. Maybe that's a good idea, just because that top 6 pairing has been struggling. Let's go replace player that put Mayfield in the lineup. So we lose in a shootout, then we beat Vegas. Game against Minnesota coming up is another win, 6-1. Ryan Johnson is back. Okay, that's good. Kind of curious on the plus minuses now on like guys like Broberg. How's Broberg looking? -5 now. So I think he was just a -11. So that top 6 pairing might be improving a lot. Mayfield only played 2 games and he was a +2 in it. So Mayfield definitely the better defensive option than Ryan Johnson. But how's Ryan Johnson's plus minus looking? -6. Yeah, so they have been improving defensively over the last little stretch. So that's good to see. As like I said, that's been like one of the only issues I've had. Nicholas Obey-Kabul has been injured with back spasms. We'll go replace player, but that's a 4th liner, so that kind of sucks. Can I just stop the sim here because I can't see what's going on? We beat Montreal, so we're on a 3-game winning streak. We've actually have points in a total of 6 straight games. So that's a nice little massive stretch for our team. Hopefully we can continue that going against Buffalo. Can we do it? Yes, we can. Nice little shutout win there. And a win there. So our team's starting to take like their form a little bit more, which is good. Was a little bit of a streaky start, but we're starting to get points in most of our games, which will be huge for the playoffs in terms of actually making it. Last 2 games of January, Obey-Kabul is back, so we won't be able to see yet. But let's get him in. Dufour was in for him. I don't mind that, because Dufour is a nice kind of like checking forward for that bottom 6. Let's get him back in here. There you go. That's good. Can't see what's happening still because this game likes to glitch in. We lost to the Flames in regulation, so there's our first game without a point in a while. Game against Utah is a 6-5 win. Not a great defensive effort, but a nice win. We are 27-22 at February the 1st. Not bad. Not bad at all. We are now 2nd place in the Metro, but we are 16 points back of the Washington Capitals. So I think even though Ovechkin would be nice for this team, them having Ovechkin kind of makes more sense because they are playing so good right now that I don't think there's any use for them to trade away somebody like Alex Ovechkin at this point. So yeah, we're probably not going to trade for Ovechkin this season, even though it would be interesting to have him with our team. I think he deserves to retire with the Washington Capitals based on how they're playing right now. All right, so let's continue to simulate a little bit more, I guess. So we'll go to February the 17th and see how we do. We do have like almost a full week off, which is kind of crazy. So game against New Jersey coming on up. In New Jersey, how are we going to do against them? We win that one, but we lose to the Kraken. Okay. 3 more games before the simulation will stop. Game against Carolina coming up as Ryan Pulock has been injured with a neck strain. That's unfortunate. At least it's not super long term, but that'll get Mayfield back into the lineup as Dufour is losing morale because of ice time, but he's not even listed as a 4th liner, so that's a little bit weird. No thank you. I do not want Capo Kakinen. Don't have any use for him. Well, we beat Carolina. We beat Columbus. Game against Florida, we lose in a shootout, but that's still a point. We are playing pretty good as of late. 63 points on the season. Last wildcard spot's on 56. Yeah, we're in a pretty good spot, but obviously we got to keep on winning games. We got to not just drop off a cliff out of nowhere. So that's good. Let's continue to simulate. Let's go another week through these 3 games against the Rangers, the Oilers, and the Sharks. Game against the Rangers coming up. The rivalry matchup is going to be a 4-1 win. Nice. Oilers, been a good team. We lose 6-3. Of course, we're going to lose to them. Makes sense. And we'll get Pulock back in since he's now back and fully healthy. Hopefully, he can stay healthy the rest of the season. There's so much old guys on this team that I feel like the trade values on these guys are going to be pretty bad when we actually start tearing it down. It's going to be very strange. Like, we don't have a lot of young guys at all on this roster. Game against the Sharks coming on up. No, we don't need Ilya Samsonov. And we lose that game in an overtime, but we're still 31-22-4. Let's go through these last 2 games of February. And then we have only a few more games left to simulate before the actual trade deadline, as Adam Pelech has now injured his foot. So a lot of defensive injuries, but the good thing is Pelech will be back before the trade deadline. It's not long term. So we beat the Kraken and we beat Vegas. That's nice. And I think Pelech should be back for this game against the Washington Capitals, who are still doing really well this season so far. Yes, he will be good, because we probably need him since he's a great defensive defenseman for the most part. We need him to shut down Alex Ovechkin if possible. So Pelech right back in there. Perfect. That's good to go. Let's see what we got here against Washington. As we're getting a trade offer from Washington, they would give us a 3rd rounder and a 6th rounder to basically take our 2nd rounder and Buzaz. I don't think that's even worth it in the slightest. So we'd move back in. We'd give up a prospect. It's kind of weird. But they're 38, 15, and 6 with Ovechkin. So that's why I'd say just it doesn't make sense to trade for Ovechkin this season. They deserve to keep on to him and win a Stanley Cup if we don't win one. Game against Washington, we actually beat them in regulation. So that's a pretty nice win. When we lose in overtime, as another injury has slapped us. And it's another kind of long-term injury, actually. So it's kind of weird because in my Draft to Glory series, if you guys don't watch that series, there was an upper body injury that one of my defensemen suffered, and he was literally out till May with an upper body injury. Now, Juuso Parssinen in this series has suffered an upper body injury. He's out till April the 4th. So he's literally out for almost a month with an upper body injury. So seems like some of these upper body injuries are a little bit more long-term than I was expecting. But that's a little bit of a blow for that 4th line. But it's not a substantial one, I would say. But that still kind of sucks to have an injury. We're still getting injured, or offered Samsonov and Sordov this time, but I'm not giving up Medvedov, even though he's probably one of the worst elite goalie prospects we have. So we do beat the Rangers. We are 35-22-5 a day before the deadline. So we are currently residing in 2nd place in the Metropolitan Division, still only behind the Washington Capitals, of course, but last wildcard's on 66 points. We're in a pretty damn good spot with 20 games to go. Just got to not obviously drop like 10 games in a row, but I do like that our team is starting to find itself in this episode. We're now still 19th in offense, so we're still not scoring a lot of goals per game, 3.27. We are now the best defensive team in the NHL, so I am curious on the goaltending stats. I could see on the bottom it says Kudobin's got a 928 still, so he did drop from a 950, but through 14 starts, a 928 is fantastic for a rookie goaltender. We are 27th on the power play, 8th in penalty kills, so we are just a pure defensive team pretty much at this point, it looks like, which is kind of interesting. So hopefully we can find our offensive touch when we get to the playoffs at some point. But Anton Frundell's apparently leading our team in points too, which is not what I was expecting to see after the start. But let's take a look at some player stats here. So Barzal's also on 60 points for the team lead, plus 17. Really good season from him so far. Brock Nelson on 59 points, 34 goals now for Brock. So Brock's on pace for probably a 40-goal season in the lowest amount, I would say. Horvat's kind of dropped off a lot this year. 44 points, but only 2 power play points. So Bo's been not as good as prior years. He is dropping off, I think, a bit, because I think he has been listed as a first liner. He's now listed as a second liner. So he's probably one of these guys that will have to go maybe in the offseason if we just start to throw everybody under the bus into different teams. Interesting. Gord on 19 points, -1, so not terrible for Yanni Gord. Parsonen still has been pretty bad defensively. He is injured at the moment. 13 points in 62 games, -8. Interesting. Suzuka's 11 points, -1, not bad, I guess. And then Malmstein hasn't played since. Actually, he's played a decent chunk, 35 games and 8 points, -1. So the bottom six maybe still has some plus-minus issues, but in terms of offense, it's fine, I guess. Left wing side of things, there's Frondell on 60 points and a +17. He's been really good this year again. And obviously, like I said, he might be a future captain for this team because he should outscore his stats from last year as well. And last year was a great year for him. So, yeah, Anton Frondell's looking pretty damn solid at this point. He's not a huge playoff performer as of late, but I hope that obviously he can start to find that. But yeah, very happy with him. We're still signed him for 4 more seasons after this. And then I'm going to give him a big deal. Miles Wood on 17 points, +1. He's definitely dropped off a lot in terms of production since last year in terms of goals, but that's okay. Right wing side of things, we have Frankie V on 53 points. Frank Vetrano has been a good addition. We don't really need to move him away, at least not yet. But yeah, he's on pace for maybe 60+ points, I guess. Something like that. Bjorkstrand's also on 53 points, another great addition that we brought in over the years. He's got 1 more year left on his contract, so he's another guy that maybe gets dealt in the offseason when we start to begin to tear down. 31 points from Holmstrom. Obey Kabul's on 7 points, -5, and Dufour has nothing. He was losing morale because of ice time too, so that's not great. Kind of surprised on that. So in terms of basically our offense, in terms of the forwards, I'd say I'm pretty impressed with the scoring for most of these guys. Like, we aren't a good offensive team, really, right? But I'd say all these guys over 30 points have been pretty good. It's just more the old veterans that are starting to drop off, like Wood, Gord. Parsonen hasn't been good. Suzuka's obviously dropping off a bit. That we're not getting a ton of scoring down in that bottom six. But I don't know if that's a thing that we really need. But obviously that's something we could look into at the deadline if we want to. From a defensive standpoint, Dobson's on 45 points. Romanov's on 24 points. Those guys have been great defensively and also chipping in with offense. Pollock on 15 points only. Ryan Johnson's only a -4 now. So yeah, him and Broberg definitely improved a bit. We also have Pellick on 11 points, +13. Broberg's a -6 only now. So it's a lot better than when they were -11, -10. But obviously they still are the one pairing that's out there for a lot of goals against, I guess. And then Mayfield was a +6 through 7 games, so maybe we get Mayfield back into the defensive core. Ryan Johnson becomes a scratch instead. We could always do that instead of upgrading our defensive core, or we could actually upgrade this defensive core, like turn Ryan Johnson or Broberg into somebody else, and then Mayfield could be just that depth defender that comes in and helps us out defensively. From a goaltending perspective, Sorokin's now up to a .906, so definitely had a much better last few games, I guess you could say. So yeah, very solid stats from Sorokin. Not as good, obviously, as last year so far still. Like, I don't think he's going to be up there for a Vezina trophy this year, but he is definitely at least starting to find his game again, which is good. And then there is Kudobin, and like I said, .928 save percentage, 2.24 goals against through 14 games for the young backup. He actually has jumped up to an 81 overall, and he's now actually listed as a backup goaltender. So Kudobin's looking very good so far. I don't know if he'll end up winning a Calder just because lack of games. Also the fact that goalies rarely win the Calder. But yeah, I'm actually pretty impressed with Kudobin's play so far up to this point in time. Let's actually take a quick look at the AHL too. So Solovyov on a .905. He's up to a 79. So is it the offseason where we move Sorokin already? Because we could literally run Solovyov and Kudobin next season. That could be the play. And then Medvedov, the other elite goalie, he's had a .922 save percentage in the AHL, up to a 61 at 21, so he's probably still quite a while away from making it, but good to see those guys simulating decently. We also have Pratt on 46 points in the AHL. He's still a 73, but hopefully he makes it soon to our NHL team. What other prospects we have down here that are interesting? Vikings had 20 points. He's up to a 70. That's not bad, but he's probably not going to become an NHLer, my guess. And then everybody else is like bottom 6 or not even a prospect, so okay. Not too bad. Not too bad at this point. I don't really know if there's any huge problems with our roster in terms of how it's simulating. Like, we could honestly just keep this roster pretty much the same unless we want to make a one last addition to basically give us a huge push. But Right now, being like the best defensive team in the NHL, we honestly could just keep it the same and then hope that our team wins. That way we're not giving up any draft picks and stuff like that. Because I do think we did give up some pick for this year. Like, what picks do we got in this year's draft? Yeah, see, we don't already have a lot of picks in this year's draft because we were trying to contend. So we do still have our first rounder, which is huge. We have a third rounder, a fifth, and a sixth. Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be any way I make any trades. Because obviously, if we were to upgrade things, we'd give up more picks for this year, and we're trying to go into a rebuild. Obviously, we could get more picks at the deadline, or not at the deadline, at the draft, and trade away players at the draft for more picks in this year's draft if it's a good draft, but I'm not too sure. They're actually recommending us take a goaltender with our first pick, which is kind of funny because we already have a lot of goalies, but Zikov is probably like a medium elite goaltender. They're recommending Brendan Jarvis right now, who I don't know if he's going to be that good. Brock Hunter might be a little elite defenseman, hard to tell, but it's going to be interesting to see what this draft class actually looks like too. Yeah. All right. So there is that. Let's take a look at the trading block now just to see what is out there, and I think that'll probably be it at this stage. I think, if I'm mistaken. I don't really know if there's anything else we want to take a look at, but maybe there is. But in terms of the trade deadline, if there's anybody to upgrade into, we could do that. But like I said, we don't really have the picks or the assets we want to give up. So unless there's a player on our roster that we upgrade, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So if we want to turn Ryan Johnson or Broberg into a better defender, we could do that. But I don't know if it's something that we need to really do because we're a good defensive team already. So is there anything interesting really on the block? Weir still, but Weir I don't think wanted to come here, right? He's already 3 years left on his contract. He'd be too pricey, obviously, to give up assets for. He would come here, but he would be probably worth our first round pick, which I'm not giving up our first rounder. Carolina, Harvey Pinard, Orlov, not really crazy players. Chicago has still Michael Misa on the block, but obviously we're not trying to offload players right now at this stage. In the offseason, if Michael Misa is still on the block, he could be a player we'd look at the draft in terms of trading away somebody to bring him in. That could be an option. Aside from that, let's see what else we got. Columbus and Colorado, what do we got with them? Nothing there. Nick Jensen, of course, and has to be on the block after I've just mentioned I just met this guy yesterday. That's pretty cool. Chinnikov, Thomas Tatar, okay. Damon Severson, Dallas, nobody right there. Detroit, not really anything there. Matthew Phillips and Graham Clark aren't really huge additions. Edmonton has nothing. Florida has nothing. This might be the most barren block I've seen. LA has not a lot either so far. Like, it's older defenders. Like, they wouldn't cost us a lot to get some of these guys, but I don't know if it's something we really need, to be honest. Montreal has nothing. Jet Wu. If only it was Jet Wu when he actually had potential. Let's see what else we got here. Braden Schneider, still a decent one, but obviously too much value. And we're trying to go into a rebuild soon. Keandre Miller's there with 1 year left. Yeah, I don't think any of those guys are worth it. Ottawa has nothing. Philadelphia has Zamula. Zamula's not bad, but I don't really know if he'd be a defensive upgrade from Ryan Johnson or anything. So, Matt Roy has 2 years left. Bobby Brink, Blake Lizotte, Jeff Skinner, Toporowski. Alec Martinez is good defensively, but he's 41 years old. He would probably retire after a year. He is a good defenseman, for sure. Would fit our pairings, but I don't know if I would want to bring in... I mean, he is a veteran that's won cups before, obviously. He probably would be nice to have for that top six or as a depth option, but I don't really know if it's something I want to bring in. Like, I feel like it would cost us, like, barely anything. Like, we could give up, like, a defensive prospect that's a 7th D in the AHL, get him in no problem, but I honestly don't know if that's something I want. Like, it's not an upgrade, really. Wallman, there's Eklund obviously there still. Askarov still on the block. Granlund. What else we got here? Brandon Montour, Burakovsky, Stevenson. Yeah, there's not really too much that screams like, hey, we need to bring this into me. At least at the moment. Toronto still has Tavares on the block. He still has too much value for me to bring him back to Long Island. David Kampf, Utah, Matthew Joseph is still there, too much value. Same with Taylor Hall. He actually doesn't have a lot of value, but he is a huge cap hit. Yakov Trenin's not a bad option for the bottom 6. Actually has good face-offs too. Like you guys were saying, maybe upgrading the bottom 6 centers. We could technically bring in Yakov Trenin, but he does have more value than I'd like to give up, to be honest. Has been good offensively this season, though, 36 points. How good is his face-off percentage, out of curiosity? 51.2%, or 92%, that's pretty good. Yeah, I don't mind Yakov Trenin. He's almost like what Yanni Gord was when we brought Yanni Gordon, but he also can play left wing as well. Like, bringing him in, maybe we could throw somebody like Parson into a deal, or somebody else in that bottom 6 and upgrade into Trenin. I don't know. Maybe that's an option. That's maybe one of the very few options we have. I don't think it would cost us a ton, but Justin Sordoff is not bad either as a bottom 6 option, but I don't think I'd bring him in. Yeah, he's not as good defensively. He does have great stick checking, but I would probably prefer a vet like Trenin over him. Anything else? Not really anything that I would bring in. Iafalo's too good. He's actually listed as a third-line checking forward. Yeah, I probably wouldn't bring in Iafalo. All right, let's take a look quickly at what it would cost for Yakov Trenin in Utah. Just because I am kind of curious on that. That's the only player I would potentially think about bringing in right now. Like, Ovechkin's not even on the block anymore, which makes total sense, like I was mentioning earlier, because of how good that team is doing. So I wanted to go to... Where's the fine trade option again? Where's the fine trade option in this? Oh, there. Damn, man. For some reason, my eyes just could not see. Okay, let's go to Utah. Just see out of curiosity. I feel like it wouldn't cost us a ton. Like, we could definitely turn one of our current bottom 6 centers into Trenin if we want. Let's see. What do they want? A second, a third, and Solnishkin. That's too much to give up. Broberg in a 7th. It would basically give us a freed up spot on that top 6 pairing. But I'm not too sure if I want to do that. It would make us weaker. There's Prince. I don't want to give him up. Parat, I don't want to give him up. Medvinov could get given up, maybe, but I don't think it'd be worth it, to be honest. So we probably would have to make out a deal with Utah for him, which if we go to proposed trade, it's funny because our game on the deadline is actually against Utah too. Of course it is. But if we looked at like the value for Trenin compared to like some other players on our roster, like I said, I would be okay with probably moving out Parson, but he is injured at the moment. That's the only problem. But like we'd probably have to turn somebody like Beck Malzheim might have to get included too, so that way if Gord gets scratched or Zizekas gets scratched, like we don't have a ton of value to give up. Like you look at the values on this team. If I remove my face for a second, we don't have a lot of value in those centers, left wingers. There's not a lot of value other than their prospects. Crane's up to a 78, by the way, in case you guys wanted to know. Right wing, not a ton of value. Really? Yeah, not a ton of value either. Defense. There's more value on our defense, but there's not really anybody that they'd want that's movable. Like, Broberg might be the only one that's movable. But if we move Broberg, basically Mayfield will draw it into the lineup, or we would have to bring in a defenseman as well at that deadline, and I feel like then we'd give up too much assets at that point. Like, there is Medvinov too, the goaltender, but then like, I don't know if he's going to pan out, to be honest. We do have a lot of goalies. We could maybe give him up, but I don't know if that's a good idea. He has been good in the AHL so far, and, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I honestly don't know if I would move him out at this point, because obviously Sorokin could be getting moved out soon too. We do have 4 goalies in our contract, huh? Yeah, that's a tough decision. Tough decision. I honestly don't know if I would bring in Trenin based on what they're trying to ask for. Like, Trenin's a great player. He would upgrade our bottom 6, but is it something that's worth giving up assets for right before our rebuild? I honestly don't know. Final thing I wanted to take a look at, though, is this year's draft class as well. Just for a little bit. Just because I know we're going to obviously be starting our rebuild this offseason. And the first overall pick this year is a franchise sniper in Jason Guerin. Okay. Well, obviously we're not going to be getting first overall, but it would be interesting if we could find a way to trade up to first overall in the offseason. But he is a left winger, and we already got a lot of good left wingers, I think, with like Rundell, with Crane. So I don't think it would be worth it to get this guy, but at the same time, it would be kind of interesting because we could easily trade like guys like Sorokin and multiple people to get this first overall pick this year, but I don't know if it would be realistic to do something like that, to be honest. Aside from that, is there any good like late round steals? Because obviously we're trying to go for a Stanley Cup, so we might be drafting late this year. Is there like any low leads so far that we know for sure that I could pin? Because I do like to pin those low leads. These guys could be Bryson Coolis. We'll pin him for now. That he could be a low lead. Tate Nicholson. He could potentially be Brock Hunter, who was recommended for us. We could pin him. There's Frolov as well, and there's a Duclair too. If we want to bring in a Duclair just to screw with Dylan a little bit, and I'm joking. Kamachi, Kopitz. Yeah, we don't know enough about this draft class yet. This guy's listed as a gem, so he could be a low elite. Michael Savret or Michel Savret. We'll pin him in case. But he could be a low 4 too, so. Why is there a Kovalchuk from Poland that plays in Sweden? That's kind of weird. Martin Kovalchuk. Oh, well. Well, anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of our New York Islanders franchise mode. So in next episode, we'll take it to the trade deadline. We'll see if we end up making any moves. To be honest, I might be just content with keeping the team the same and just seeing how far this team can go again this season. That way we don't give up any picks or prospects. But if we do want to upgrade our bottom 6 centers and stuff like that, obviously I think Yakov Trenin could be a good addition. But we might have to give away something that we don't really want to give up. So I don't know if it's going to be worth doing something like that. So honestly, we might just run the rest of this team the rest of the season and see what ends up happening. Because to be honest, we have nothing to lose at this point. Like I said, after the season, we go into a rebuild and we'll see what ends up happening with our roster and all that. Obviously, it's going to take a number of years to get back to the playoffs again after this year, probably. But I am excited for the turnover and seeing what those young prospects like the goalies and all that can do down the road. So anything down below, and I'll see you guys next time.